Between the World and Me. Between the World and Me is a book written by Ta-Nehisi Coates that is structured as a letter to his teenage son. In the book, Coates shares his experiences growing up as a black man in America, his reflections on the history of racism and oppression in the United States, and his concerns for his son's future. 1. The Perils of Being Black. In The Perils of Being Black, Ta-Nehisi Coates describes his experiences growing up as a black man in America, and how he learned from an early age that his body was vulnerable to violence and oppression. He recounts a particular incident from his childhood where his father was pulled over by the police, and the fear and helplessness he felt in that moment. Coates explains that this experience, and others like it, taught him that black people in America are constantly at risk of being subject to violence and injustice at the hands of those in power. Coates also reflects on the deaths of black people like Prince Jones and Eric Garner, who were killed by police officers despite being unarmed and posing no threat. He explains how these events and others like them have traumatized black people across America, and how they have contributed to a collective sense of grief and anger within the black community. The chapter is a powerful indictment of the systemic racism and white supremacy that is woven into the fabric of American society. Coates argues that black people are forced to live in a state of constant vigilance, always aware of the dangers that exist in a world where their lives are valued less than those of white people. He also suggests that this state of constant fear and vulnerability has a profound impact on the mental health and well-being of black people, contributing to a range of social and economic disparities. Overall, The Perils of Being Black sets the stage for the rest of the book, which explores the ways in which racism and white supremacy are deeply ingrained in American culture and history, and how they continue to shape the lives of black people in America today. 2. The Beautiful Struggle. The Beautiful Struggle is the second chapter in Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. In this chapter, Coates reflects on his upbringing in Baltimore and his relationship with his father, who was a Vietnam veteran, former Black Panther, and dedicated community organizer. The chapter describes the challenges and complexities of growing up in a community that was both deeply affected by poverty and violence, and also imbued with a sense of pride and resilience. Coates discusses his father's efforts to educate him and his siblings about their heritage and culture, and the way in which he instilled in them a sense of responsibility to their community. He also reflects on the various pressures and conflicts he faced as a young black man, including the need to navigate between different social groups and identities, and the struggle to find his own voice in a world that often silenced or marginalized the experiences of black people. The Beautiful Struggle is a poignant and powerful reflection on the experiences of black youth in America, and the ways in which they are forced to navigate a complex and often hostile social landscape. It also highlights the importance of community and the role that family and other social institutions can play in shaping the lives and futures of young people, especially in the face of systemic inequalities and injustice. 3. This Mecca, This Beloved Community. This Mecca, This Beloved Community is the third chapter in Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. In this chapter, Coates reflects on his experiences as a student at Howard University, a historically black university in Washington, D.C. He describes the sense of belonging and community that he found at Howard, and the profound impact that it had on his understanding of himself and his place in the world. Coates explains that at Howard, he was able to connect with other black students and faculty members who were engaged in intellectual and cultural exploration, and who were dedicated to the project of black liberation. He describes the various academic and social spaces on campus, including the Black Student Union and the African American Studies Department, which provided a space for black students to come together and exchange ideas. The chapter also explores the legacy of Howard University and other historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, which have played a central role in the education and empowerment of black people in America. Coates argues that HBCUs have a unique and important role to play in the struggle for black liberation, both by providing access to education and by fostering a sense of community and identity among black students. Overall, This Mecca, This Beloved Community is a celebration of the power of education and community in the fight against racism and white supremacy. Coates argues that spaces like Howard University provide a crucial space for black people to come together and explore their identity, history, and culture, and to develop the skills and knowledge necessary to create a more just and equitable society. 4. The 4th of July. The 4th of July is the fourth chapter in Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. In this chapter, Coates reflects on his experiences growing up in Baltimore and his family's annual trip to Washington, D.C. to celebrate the 4th of July. He describes the contradictions of this celebration, which on the one hand represented the ideals of freedom and democracy, but on the other hand excluded and oppressed black people. Coates discusses the history of the 4th of July and its significance for black people in America, noting that it was not until the Civil War and the end of slavery that black people were able to participate fully in the celebration. He also reflects on the ways in which the celebration of the 4th of July perpetuates a myth of American exceptionalism and ignores the many injustices and atrocities committed by the United States government and its citizens, particularly against black people. The chapter also explores Coates' relationship with his father and their differing perspectives on the 4th of July. Coates' father, who had served in Vietnam and was a proud American, saw the holiday as an opportunity to celebrate the progress that had been made towards racial equality in America. Coates, however, saw the holiday as a reminder of the many ways in which black people continue to be oppressed and excluded from American society. Overall, the 4th of July is a reflection on the complex and often contradictory nature of American identity and history. Coates argues that while America has made progress towards racial equality, it continues to be plagued by systemic racism and white supremacy, and that these issues must be confronted and addressed if the country is to live up to its ideals of freedom and democracy. 5. A Preamble to Our Lives. A Preamble to Our Lives is the fifth chapter in Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. In this chapter, Coates reflects on the ways in which race and racism are embedded in American culture and history, and how this has affected his own life and the lives of other black people in America. The chapter begins with Coates recounting a conversation he had with a white friend who asked him why he was always so angry. Coates uses this conversation as a way to explore the ways in which white people often dismiss or ignore the experiences of black people, and how this perpetuates systemic racism and inequality. Coates also discusses the concept of the dream, which he describes as the belief that in America, anyone can achieve success and prosperity through hard work and determination. He argues that this dream is fundamentally flawed, as it ignores the ways in which race and racism continue to shape American society and limit the opportunities available to black people. The chapter also explores Coates' relationship with his own body, and how his experiences as a black man have shaped his understanding of himself and his place in the world. He discusses the fear and violence that black bodies are subjected to in American society, and the way in which this creates a sense of vulnerability and insecurity for black people. Overall, A Preamble to Our Lives is a powerful and emotional reflection on the ways in which race and racism are embedded in American culture and society, and how this affects the lives of black people. Coates argues that in order to address these issues, white people must confront the ways in which they have benefited from and perpetuated systemic racism, and work towards a more just and equitable society for all. 6. Hallowed by the Color of Their Skin. Hallowed by the Color of Their Skin is the sixth chapter in Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. In this chapter, Coates reflects on the legacy of racism and oppression in America, and the ways in which white supremacy has been ingrained in the country's institutions and culture. Coates begins by discussing the history of housing discrimination in America, which has led to the creation of segregated neighborhoods and perpetuated inequality and poverty in black communities. He also discusses the concept of white flight, in which white people move out of cities and neighborhoods as soon as black people begin to move in, further entrenching segregation. The chapter also explores the history of policing in America, and the ways in which black people have been disproportionately targeted and victimized by law enforcement. Coates discusses the concept of broken windows policing, which focuses on cracking down on minor offenses in order to prevent more serious crimes, and argues that this approach has led to the criminalization and harassment of black people. Coates also discusses the legacy of slavery and the ways in which it continues to shape American society, including through the exploitation of black labor and the erasure of black history and culture. Overall, Hallowed by the Color of Their Skin is a powerful and incisive analysis of the ways in which racism and white supremacy have been embedded in America's institutions and culture. Coates argues that in order to address these issues, we must confront the legacy of slavery and segregation, and work to create a more just and equitable society for all people, regardless of race. 7. The Black Body. The Black Body is the 7th chapter in Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. In this chapter, Coates reflects on the ways in which black bodies have been exploited, brutalized, and violated throughout American history. He begins by discussing the history of slavery in America and the ways in which black bodies were commodified and treated as property. He argues that the legacy of slavery has left a lasting impact on American society, shaping the ways in which black bodies are viewed and treated. Coates also discusses the ways in which black bodies continue to be subjected to violence and exploitation in the present day. He explores the concept of the dream, or the idea that hard work and determination can lead to success and prosperity in America, and argues that this dream is fundamentally flawed, as it ignores the ways in which race and racism continue to shape American society. Throughout the chapter, Coates reflects on his own experiences as a black man and the ways in which he has had to navigate fear and vulnerability due to the violence and discrimination that he faces on a daily basis. He concludes by urging his son to be aware of the ways in which his own body is viewed and treated in American society, and to be vigilant in protecting himself from the harm and exploitation that can come with being a black man in America. 8. The World and the Me. In this chapter, Coates explores the tension between the external world and his own inner self. He reflects on the ways in which his experiences as a black man in America have shaped his identity and worldview, and the ways in which his personal struggles are intertwined with the larger societal forces of racism and inequality. Coates also discusses the ways in which he has come to understand and process his own emotions, particularly in relation to the deaths of friends and family members. He reflects on the ways in which grief and anger can be both destructive and transformative, and the importance of finding healthy ways to channel these emotions. Throughout the chapter, Coates addresses his son directly, encouraging him to find his own sense of purpose and identity in a world that can be hostile and oppressive towards black people. He acknowledges the difficulties and challenges that his son will face as he grows up, but also emphasizes the resilience and strength that can come from facing these challenges head-on. Overall, The World and the Me is a deeply personal chapter that reflects on Coates' own experiences and emotions, while also connecting these experiences to larger societal issues of race and inequality. 9. Down to the River. In this chapter, Coates reflects on the importance of family, community, and tradition in the lives of black people. He begins by discussing his own upbringing and the ways in which his family and community provided him with a sense of belonging and identity. He reflects on the role that his parents played in shaping his worldview and instilling in him a sense of pride in his blackness. Coates also discusses the importance of the broader black community and the ways in which black people have come together to resist oppression and advocate for their rights. He reflects on the power of collective action and the importance of solidarity in the face of systemic racism and injustice. The title of the chapter, Down to the River, is a reference to a traditional African-American spiritual that has been passed down through generations. Coates reflects on the power of music and tradition in the lives of black people, and the ways in which these cultural practices have served as a source of strength and resilience. Throughout the chapter, Coates also addresses his son directly, urging him to stay connected to his roots and to find strength and inspiration in the legacy of black struggle and resistance. He concludes the book by emphasizing the importance of continuing to fight for justice and equality, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Conclusion. Between the World and Me is a powerful and deeply personal reflection on the experiences of black people in America, and the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. It challenges readers to confront the systemic injustices that continue to shape American society, and to work towards creating a more just and equitable future for all.